Greetings, everybody, and welcome once more to the Dracovin Empire. It is I, the Emperor here, Tantus Naravan Dracovin, once again leading you into history. We're going back in time and going to be learning about another Magic the Gathering set that was released a good number of years ago. We've been kind of going through this historical kind of thing where I'm opening up my time portal, leading you here in the Dracovin Empire. Hey, before we head to time portal today, please do remember, give me a little bit of tip before we go. Make sure you're subscribed if you aren't already. Do the various things for YouTube. And of course, let me know if you played any of these cards or interested in them. Today, we're diving into the second set of Ravnica block, Gatecrash, which means we're going back to February 2013. So if you're ready to join me back in 2013, take my hand. Let's get going. Time portal awaits. The 2010s also await us. We're back in time. It's 2013. Isn't that exciting? It's not a terrible time period now. Maybe, depending on who you are. Anyway, there's always a good time period depending on where you are and who you are in the world. Gotta admit that. We're going to be learning about Gatecrash. Why don't we dive into it and get started? Gatecrash. Hi, Gatecrash. Nice to see you. So this is, of course, the second set in the Ravnica block. It is a large expansion. That's an important thing to talk about when we kind of talk about these expansions. Return to Ravnica was a big block. There's no denying that. Because, well, at very least, the third set is a normal-sized expansion, but still. This, of course, was the 60th expansion for Magic the Gathering. And the official release date was February 1st, 2013. This is the symbol. It represents an arch of a gate. Hey, there's these gate cards that were introduced in the last set. Maybe that's why Gatecrash, gates, a gate. Our lead designers were there two co-designers that were ahead of this. We had, of course, Mark Rosewater and Mark Guttilebe, sorry if I butcher a name, who were both the lead designers for this set. The head developer was David Humphreys, and of course the art director was Jeremy Jarvis. We're back in Ravnica, cool. We got the guilds, we got gates, we got hybrid mana, we got a bunch of new keywords, which we're going to talk about today. We had 249 cards. As I said, we are a large expansion. And of course, of those 249 cards, they each have a premium foil version of them. There was 101 commons, 80 uncommons, 53 rares, and 15 mythic rares. Like the set before, we're based on the guilds. We have guild systems, we have multicolor cards, but we have to talk about the 5 guilds that we're going to be diving in today. Of course, we'll start with the Boros Legion. We've got Assemble Legion here as a card as an example from them, where you get a muster counter on it at the beginning of your upkeep, and then get a soldier token onto the battlefield with haste for each muster counter on it. We, of course, had the Dimir, House Dimir. And we have Undercity Plague representing them, where a target player loses life, discards a card, and sacrifices a permanent. And then we have our new keyword, Cipher, for Dimir. We'll talk about what Cipher does particularly, but we'll just mention it is on this card now. We're going to dive into that mechanics a little later. Of course, we had the Gruul Clans. And Clan Defiance here represents an X spell where you choose one or more, deal X damage to target creature with flying, X damage to target creature without flying, and or X damage to target player. So, technically you could do it to all of them, hit 2 creatures and a player for X and 2 colors. This is pretty good for a burn spell. The Orzhov Syndicate, our good old white-black, and our Death Pact Angel here, our flying 5/5. When it dies, you get a black-white cleric that's a 1/1 that has the ability to pay its mana cost, tap, and sacrifice it to get the angel back. So yeah, if it dies, you have a chance of bringing it back for the same mana cost. And of course, then, the Simic Combine, our blue-green. And Biomass Mutation here is another X spell where creatures you control become XX until end of turn. There's our examples of the guilds. Now, even being a large expansion, we didn't have basic lands. I think that's an important thing to say. Return to Ravnica had extra basic lands. Gatecrash had none. And traditionally, when you have a large expansion, usually, not always, but sometimes they do have basic lands. Granted, we still had lands like our, you know, good old breeding pool here. That was a forest island. Of course, then, they weren't basic, though. High breeding pool. We had 2 Planeswalkers that were the focus of this deck. One of them's a pretty big one. You may have heard of him. This man named Gideon. I don't know. We got the Camp Chard Gideon Camp Champion of Justice, who has 4 loyalty counters. He ticks up to get a loyalty counter. And ticking him up 1, he also gets a loyalty counter for each creature target opponent controls. So yeah, if your opponent has a bunch of creatures, Gideon goes up pretty quickly. Interesting. And then he has the ability to become a creature until end of turn. That's an indestructible human soldier with power and toughness equal to his number of loyalty counters for 0, still a planeswalker, and you prevent all damage that would be dealt to him this turn. So not only is he indestructible, but he prevents damage, which is an important thing because damage equals loss of counters. So you can't get rid of him with destroy effects when he transforms, but you also can't remove his loyalty counters from damage. That's actually a pretty good distinction there. And anyway, -15 to exile other permanents. You could build that up to a larger number than 15, so you nuke everything and then just keep beating up people with a large Gideon. Especially if there's a lot of creatures. But again, you have to target opponent with him. And we had a new Planeswalker as our other Planeswalker in this set, Dormy Raid. He'll be important in the story. He's kind of a jerk. Don't worry about it. But anyway, his abilities are ticking up 1. Look at the top card of your library. If it's a creature, you reveal, put in your hand. Tick down 2. Have a creature you control fight another target creature. And of course, -7, you get an emblem where your creatures have double strike, trample, hexproof, and haste. Emblems are nice, and that's a pretty good emblem. Double strike, trample, hexproof, and haste. Pretty nice. Now we turn towards the story of the set. And of course, Gatecrash, the Secretarius Part 2, was our main place that we had the story. This was the second ebook related to Return to Ravnica block written by Doug Beyer and released in February of 2013. This wasn't the only thing, but this is Jace dealing with what's going on now, and also Gideon's there, and there's a storyline going on, and the implicit maze that's going on. So this is an important part of the entire story, but more of the story is told through more of the story articles that Wizards put up there. Rule Ingenuity, the Fathom Effect, the Absolution of the Guild Pact, Persistence of Memory, the Burying Part 1 and Part 2, the Greater Good, the Guild of Deals, Experiment 1, Flips, Belargu Will Come For You, The Hard Sell, and Behind the Black Sun. All these were released between January, beginning of January in 2013, all the way up through the end of March. So it was from the original release, Gruul Ingenuity, released on the January 2nd, and of course Behind the Black Sun, released on March 27th. And all these do relate to Guild Pact in particular. So that's important to keep in mind out that these tell combined the story of what's going on and what's going on with these particular guilds. Let's look at what was sold, what packs, what cards were there. First off, we've got our booster packs. These are the 16 card booster packs. They're technically the 15 cards with a token / emblem / bonus card. We'll talk about it a little bit too. But yes, and the stuff that was on them, the images here are Duskmantle Guildmage, Prime Speaker, Zengana, Skark Guildmage, Visipunk Guildmage, and Sunhome Guildmage, which is interesting because it's for the Guildmage and one of the guild leaders. Yeah. A little unusual, but there. There was also 6 card booster packs with Dormy Raid on it. Hi, Dormy. We, of course, had our 5 intro packs, which we'll talk about a little later. Our 2 event decks. A fat pack. Everybody loves those. A little favorite of mine. And, of course, like the previous set, we had a booster battle pack, which had 2 booster packs and 2 semi-randomized guild decks of 22 cards. There was some promo stuff that actually mimics the promo that happened previously. We had Niv Mizzet with Jace Beleren previously, and we have Aurelia from Boros Legion being kind of in a similar position with Gideon Jorah. And these two kind of mimic each other, but also are kind of hinting at the overall storyline. They're there for a reason, not a crazy reason overall, but they're there for a reason, and that's kind of the promotional art that was related to this entire set. Wizards of the Coast also, I'm just showing off the booster back here, but I don't have a good picture of it, had a website you could go to, a Choose Your Guild interactive quiz and Planeswalker Point webpage that were related to Guild Gatecrash. And this would allow you to basically go in there, kind of do stuff to figure out what guild you are. Kind of a neat little idea there. Let's talk the pre-release, because the pre-release was on January 26th to 27th of 2013. And hey, remember last time where you got to choose your guild as part of the pre-release? It's happening again. You get to choose your guild when you go to the pre-release, and you got a 5 Gatecrash boosters, a guild-specific sticker, an acceptance letter from the guild leader, a spin-down life counter, a promotional release card. We'll talk about the cards in a minute. And of course, an achievement challenge card, and a guild-specific booster that you were able to build into this. So there was really interesting pre-release packs, very similar to the ones that were in the previous set, Return to Ravnica, but, you know, for the other 5 guilds. Let's take a look at those promos then, you know. Of course, for Boros, you had Foundry Champion here. Hi, Foundry Champion. So, Foundry Champion, we'll talk about a little bit here. Enters the battlefield, deals damage to target creature or player equal to the number of creatures you control. And for red, it has the fire breathing, gets bigger power. For white, it gets bigger toughness. Of course, for Dimir, we had Consuming Aberration, a favorite of mine. I do like Consuming Aberration. I do have it in my blue-black deck. I'm a mean person. Power and toughness equal. Power and toughness are each equal to the number of cards in your opponent's graveyards. So this is also very good in, like, you know, multiplayer. You know, something like Commander, where you have a lot of things in it. And whenever you cast a spell, each opponent reveals cards from the top of his or her library until it reveals the land cards and puts those cards into his or her graveyard. This is an effect that doesn't have a keyword, but it's kind of referred to as grind because it grinds away to a land. It's got a grind effect. We'll talk about grind a little bit. It is related to Dimir. Rumble Hulk, with power and toughness, equal number of lands you control, and it's got the new Gruul ability of Blood Rush. So this is the Gruul one here, where we'll talk what Blood Rush does, but in this case, you pay some mana, discard it, and target attack creature gets X plus X plus X with X number of lands you control. For Orzhov, of course, we had Treasury Thrall, High Treasury Thrall, where it had Extort, the keyword for Orzhov. And when it attacks, you may return target artifact, creature, or enchantment card from your graveyard to your hand. So, yeah, it's got its special ability. When it attacks, you get something. And of course, for the Simic deck, if you chose that for your pre-release, you got Fathom Mage. Again, it's got the keyword ability, Evolve. I think the only one that doesn't have the keyword ability of... No, the Dimir and the Boros ones don't. But it's interesting that 3 of them do have the keyword ability of their guild. But anyway, whenever +1/+1 counter is placed on it, you can draw a card for Fathom Mage. So, these were the big cards for the pre-release. But there were other promos and other events that happened. Hey, after we had our pre-release, we had our launch party, which was from February 1st to 4th of 2013. And of course, we had a release card, Skrog, Goliath, the 9/9 trample with Blood Rush. So we're getting a Gruul card here, where you can discard and target creature gets +9/+9 and trample until end of turn. Of course, if you went to Game Day, which Game Day was on February 23rd, 24th, if you just participated in Game Day, you got a Zamek Good Guild Mage. So one of those Guild Mage, this one for a blue and a green. This turn, each creature you control enters the battlefield with an initial +1/+1 counter, and you can also then remove +1/+1 counters to draw cards. +1/+1 counters matter for Simic here. And of course, if you placed top 8 at Game Day, you got a Firemane Angel, a 3/3 flying battalion. This, of course, is the Boros ability. And when it or 2 other creatures attacks, it deals 3 damage to target creature or player, and you gain 3 life. Now, there was a buy a box promo, of course. Everybody loves a good buy a box promo in Nightvale Spectre. So if you got a box at a local game store, you get this promo card version of Nightvale Spectre, a 2/3 flyer. When it deals combat damage to a player, that player exiles the top card of his or her library, and you can play cards exiled with Nightvale Spectre. So a very interesting kind of version of the like Hypnotic Spectre, where instead of attacking an opponent's hand, where a lot of Spectres normally do, you're attacking their library and then possibly stealing those cards. I like Nightveil Spectre here. There was also a promo token. Yeah! So for Gatecrash League, remember in Return to Ravnica League, there was a token? In Gatecrash League, there's a red-white 1/1 soldier token. Got that promo there too. Anyway. So there was a bunch of tokens. There were in fact 7 tokens in this set. Technically there was 10 because some of the tokens from the previous set actually kind of were here. But for this one particular, there were things like this 1/1 flying spirit, black-white spirit, and 7 others, of course, that were created there. And we had our 1 emblem added, our Dormy Raid emblem. I think it's Dormy Raid, which is, you know, the creatures you control have double strike, trample, hexproof, haste. Good old that. All right. Now we do have to talk about the themes, mechanics, the keywords, the abilities, all those important things, and we can kind of look at this when we look at the guilds. The 5 that were in here, and we can start with House Dimir. We're going to talk about our good leader of House Dimir. We'll talk about their keyword, and we'll talk about some of the other types of cards that appear when related to Dimir, our black-blue set. So we start off with Laziv Dimir Mastermind, a 3/3 hexproof shape changer. Whenever a creature card is put into the opponent's graveyard from anywhere, you can have Laziv become a copy, except it's still got its name, and it's legendary in addition to its other types, and gains hexproof. So it just basically stays the same, but also changes to those creatures. Very interesting kind of there. Of course, oh. Did I miss a card here? My. When I see what I simply make a mistake somewhere in here. When I'm talking about Laziv, I don't have my Cipher card available. Well. My mistake. I did seem to miss the Cipher card. I think one of the cards I have in here has... Nope. We'll have to talk about Cipher then. Just for a second. I did show a Cipher card off earlier, if you recall, when we talked about Dimir originally. One of the original cards I was showing off was a Cipher card. We can talk about what Cipher does now. I'll keep him here just because, you know, I made the mistake and, you know, didn't have a proper Cipher card. Well, Cipher is an interesting ability. That is added. That's the Dimir keyword here. You can exile that spell card encoded on another creature you control. What this means is whenever that creature deals combat damage to a player, the controller may cast a copy of the encoded card without paying its mana cost. So there's an important things about here with Cipher. You cast it first. Undercity Plague I showed off earlier, I cast that. I choose a creature I control. Whenever that creature then deals combat damage to a player, and here's the important part about it. It doesn't mean I have to retain control. Someone could steal that creature, and then its controller can cast a copy of the encoded card without paying its mana cost. But if it's me, I cast a copy of it, but it has to be combat damage. So basically, putting a Cipher card on a unblockable creature would probably be a very good idea as a way to sneak in some damage and to Cipher something there. But there you go. Wow. Sometimes I make mistakes. I missed a card there. I don't think even got a Cipher card. Anyway, let's talk about Coerced Confession, because we're grinding. Well, yes and no. We're doing graveyard related stuff. We're doing milling related stuff. Coerced Conversion here isn't technically a grind. I'm showing off the grind card earlier, but this is, we're getting an effect of milling a lot of it. It's blue, black, it mills. Target player puts the top 4 cards of his or her library in his graveyard. You draw a card for each creature put into the graveyard this way. And other similar abilities, we do have things that graveyard matters in a lot of ways. And we get the Duskmantle Guildmage. Whenever a card is put into an opponent's graveyard from anywhere this turn, that player loses 1 life. You have to pay that mana. But yeah, and probably you could pay that mana multiple times to have multiple triggers of it. But it does mean then if you would have a lot of mana, do that a couple of times, and then board wipe a bunch of creatures your opponent controls, they lose a bunch of life. And then, of course, milling again too. Target player puts the top 2 cards of his or library into the graveyard. Anyway, and the other time is this kind of like Saboteur theme. There's a lot of related but also slightly different themes within Dimir. It's the most interesting one here. In this case, Mind Grind, where each opponent reveals cards from his or top of his or her library until she reveals X lands. Oh, this is... I had them in reverse order. This is the grind. The other things with the Saboteur. My bad. And then puts all cards revealed that way into her graveyard. X can't be 0. So yeah, this is the grind ability. I grind to... And again, why it's called grind. God. Let's talk about the Gruul. Good old Gruul clans with Borigomos. They're much simpler, a lot less complex. High Borigomos, a 7/6 trample. When deals combat damage player, reveal the top 3 cards from your library. Put all land cards into your hand, rest in the graveyard, and you can discard a land to have Borigomos do 3 damage to target creature or player. So you kind of want lands in your hand to discard them to nuke things, but also you can get them into your hand using Borigomos. Of course, then we have our special ability, Blood Rush. It's all about basically discarding the card that you have. In this case, you pay a mana, discard the card, and give a bonus to a attacking creature. For this one here, the Gore Clan Rampager, it's a red and a green. You discard it, target attacking creature gets +4/+4 and trample until turn. It is a 4/4 trample, and it gives something +4/+4 and trample. You see how this works here. It gives its power and toughness as a bonus, and a lot of its special abilities oftentimes, too. And of course, there is, with another High Rumblehawk, we saw you earlier. And the reason I'm bringing back Rumblehawk again, because Rumblehawk is a great way to show up. I showed him off with the, promo version of him. Lands matter a lot of Gruul you can see here. There's a land theme here. Power and toughness equal lands you control with Rumblehawk. Ah, the Ghost Council. How good to see you once more. Oh, but that's the Ghost Council. We've moved on to our good friend, the Orzhov Syndicate. When the council here enters the battlefield, target opponent loses 2 life and you gain 2 life. At the beginning of your end step, you may exile it. The Ghost Council. If you do return to the battlefield under its owner's control at the beginning of your next upkeep, it gains haste. So this is a very interesting one, because I can put it into play, drain someone, and at my end step, I can flash it out until my next upkeep, where it enters again, I drain someone again, and I could also attack with it, because it's a 5/5 and it has haste now that's returned this way. So it's all about flashing itself in and out and training people and you gaining life. Very interesting with the Ghost Council there. I like that one too. And of course we have the Orzhov Syndicate special ability, Extort. We're going to be extorting you for a bunch of stuff. This is the Basilica Screecher, the 1/2 flyer for 2 mana. Not too great. What's really great about it is its extort ability. Whenever you cast a spell, you may play a black/white, and if you do, each opponent loses 1 life and you gain that much life. Yes, this is even more gross in multiplayer. If I'm playing a commander game with 3 opponents, I extort them. Each of them loses 1 life, I gain 3 life. If it's just one-on-one, hey, I lose 1 life, I gain 1 life. But it does mean that every time I cast any spell, I can pay the extort cost for each extort creature I have. If I have 3 extort creatures and I pay 3 extra mana because I have it, hey, I just drained you for 3 life, I gain 3 life. Or if it's multiplayer, I drained everybody for 3 life, I gain a crap ton. I like extort. I do. So, and of course, with another extort creature here, life matters, where you're either gaining or losing life as it basically a bleeding kind of effects, where it's very important here. Our Vizkopa Confessor, our 1/3 extort, as whenever it enters the battlefield, you can pay any amount of life, bleed yourself, and target opponent reveals that many cards from his or her hand, and you can choose an exile card from it. So yeah, you pay a bunch of life, you've been gaining with extort, and you, hey, get rid of a card from an opponent's hand, exile it. Moving on from the Syndicate, though, we do have to talk about the Legion. Hello, Boros Legion, and hello, Aurelia the War Leader. We were just hanging out with Gideon a minute ago. Our 3/4 Flying Vigilance Haste. Whenever it attacks for the first time each turn, you untap all creatures you control and get an additional combat phase. So yes, a 6 mana, 3/4 Flying Vigilance Haste, that's a little expensive. But every time you attack with her, the first time each turn, you get an additional combat. That could be pretty good. That could be pretty good. Thanks, Aurelia. And of course, our special ability is Battalion. Basically, Battalion means whenever the creature that has Battalion and at least 2 other creatures attack, you get an effect. Frontline medic here, creatures you control are indestructible until end of turn. So I just have to attack with 3 creatures to give all my stuff indestructible until end of turn. And that can be the same for all the battalion creatures. You attack with the battalion creature and 2 others. And those creatures could have battalion, meaning all 3 battalion abilities activate. You can see how battalion can be pretty powerful too. Frontline medic also, you can sacrifice it to counter a spell with X in its mana cost unless its controller plays 3. Hey, you know, you have to pay 3 less X now. That can kind of be mean. And of course, +1 small creatures is a big part about this. We saw Assemble a Legion earlier. Now we have Sunhome Guildmage, where you can pay mana to get a 1/1 red-white soldier creature with haste on the battlefield, but also, hey, pay some mana to creatures you control, get +1/+0 until end of turn. Creatures. So for 3 mana, all my things get +1/+0 until end of turn. I can keep paying that mana cost. And same with, for 4 mana, including a red and white, a lot of soldier tokens. We move on to Simic Combine. Hello, Simic Combine. Hello, Prime Speaker Zengana. So, the Prime Speaker here enters the battlefield with X +1/+1 counters, where X is the greatest power among other creatures you control. So, if I have a big old creature, something from green, which does have a lot of green big creatures, I play Zengana, she gets a bunch of +1/+1 counters. And when she enters, you get to draw cards equal to its power. So yeah. So, in this case, order matters. Because when she enters the battlefield, you get the +1/+1 counters. She gets big. Then I draw a bunch of cards. Zengana, nice to have you. We've got Evolve as our keyword. Now, our 0/4 unblockable, that doesn't seem very difficult, but it has Evolve. Whenever a creature, doesn't mean, it means it's not just under your control, enters the, oh no, it does under your control, sorry. When a creature enters the battlefield under your control, sorry, I missed that part of that here. I kind of remember Evolve here too. If that creature has greater power or toughness than this creature, put +1/+1 counter on. We have a 0/4 here. Meaning if I play a 1 power creature, gets +1/+1 counter. After that, if I play 2 power creature, gets +1/+1 counter. If I play a 5 toughness creature, gets +1/+1 counter. I can keep pumping this up, and it starts as a 0/4 unblockable and can get mean. And so you can see, other than having Evolve, +1/+1 counters matter. Our Nimbus Swimmer here, our Flying Leviathan that enters with X +1/+1 counters on it. It's an X creature. Yeah, +1/+1 counters is a big theme of the Simic Combine. Now there are some other elements that are, of course, brought about in here. And we can start, of course, with Hybrid Mana. Now I will note, officially the right order for the guilds in this set were Boris Legion, House Dimir, Gruul Clans, Orzhov Syndicate, Simic Combine. If it really matters, if for order, rather than normal mana order in a lot of ways. But just like the last set, Hybrid Mana returns, we've got our good old Immortal Servitude here, where we return each creature card with a converted mana cost of X from your graveyard to the battlefield. Now again, 3 mana and X, this is an exact number, but if you're playing a deck where you're playing with a lot of similar mana cost creatures, it can be helpful. It's not the best, but it has places. Immortal Servitude. We also had Defenders again. Remember last set with Defenders? In this case, we're showing off Basilica Guards here, the 1/4 Defender with Extort. And of course, we have more enchantments and auras, and land auras being another part of this set. This one, enchanting a land makes it a swamp, and whenever a creature's enchanted land becomes tapped, its controller loses 2 life. This is a reprint, but you know, I'm showing it off because it's one of the land auras, and I think it's one of the mean ones. And of course, high gates. We have the Dimir Guild Gate. It's the gate for the Dimir. I'm like, it's like, look, we have gates. They're back. Let's talk about the cycles. So, there were a few cycles outside the guild cycles, and we can start with the Primordials. Yes, we have these Primordials who are rare avatars that each cost 5 colorless and 2 of a color, and have a combat-related ability. And they also have a Enter the Battlefield triggered ability, which basically scales up with the more opponents you have. The more opponents, the bigger it is. So you can see this is a 5/4 Intimidate. So it's 5/4. It's got the Intimidate ability. When it enters the battlefield, for each opponent, you may put up to 1 target creature card from that player's graveyard on the battlefield under your control. So yes, when I play this Primordial, I steal a creature card from each opponent's graveyard. Similarly speaking, we had the Denizens. These were common creatures with a trigger ability, and each triggered whenever a creature of a color entered the battlefield under your control. Say hello to Ivy Lane Denizen here, who, when another green creature enters the battlefield under control, put a +1/+1 counter on target creature. That can be pretty good. Not great, but you can work with Simic. You're not a Simic person, but you can work with Simic. And of course, we did have more land auras. There was a cycle of them. I showed off Contaminated Grounds. This is another one of them, Tin Street Market. These are auras that enchant lands that have an activated ability with tap. And it's in its cost or triggered ability, which triggers when the land taps. In this case, hello, tap, discard a card, draw a card. That can be pretty good. Discarding and drawing a card. I mean, Contaminated Grounds, you know, when it becomes tapped and a controller loses a life. But, you know, there you go. Now we have to talk about the cycles that exist throughout the entire block of cards. And we have to turn back to the guild cycles. Because the same guild cycles we talked about before return for the 5 new guilds. We do have to talk about them. And we can start off with, hello, Aurelia's Fury. We're talking about, oh, I'm sorry. It was out of control order. Why is Aurelia's Fury? Yeah. Oh, yeah. Sorry. I did forget one cycle. There was a special guild cycle only in here. So yes, this is a guild cycle. It is one of the guild cycles, so I was right to talk about them. But there's a guild cycle that's particularly in Gatecrash. This isn't in Return to Ravnica. This is the X multicolored guild cycle. They're rare multicolored cards with X in them. I've talked about a few of them. They're not all the same, but well, most of them are rare. There's a mythic. There is one that's hybrid mana. There is one that's a creature card. But each basically one has an X. Aurelia's Fury here is the mythic one. It deals X damage divided as you choose among any number of target creatures and/or players. Tap each of those dealt damage this way, and players dealt damage can't cast non-creature spells this turn. So it's an instant. Not only can I prevent an opponent from playing non-creature spells, I can tap a bunch of their creatures, I can nuke a bunch of their creatures. So the Fury has some very good abilities, and we've already seen Clan Defiance, Mind Grind, Immortal Service, and Nimbus Swinburne. Talk about all of them. Anyway, sorry. Okay. Now we talk about the other ones that are part of the Mega Cycles. Those were the specific ones. Off-color activation cards. Hey, each one has a activate ability of the other color of the ones. Hello, Dimir Horror of the Dim, where it gains hexproof until end of turn. Yeah, pretty simple that way. Of course, we had Charms with Dimir Charm. Guild Charms. Basically, costs 2 mana, has a variety of effects that are thematically there. You choose one of them. This one's counter a target sorcery spell, destroying a creature power 2 or less, or look at the top 3 cards of a player's library, put 1 back and the rest in the graveyard. So, hey, you can do it yourself, of course. Keep 1, put the rest in your graveyard, especially with graveyard abilities, or just, technically mill 2. We had the Guild Mages, where we have the Visipok Guild Mage, where target creature gains life until end of turn, or whenever you gain life this turn, each opponent loses that much life. Man, that's an effect that can go into when an opponent loses life, you gain life. You can make that's a win condition having these 2 abilities. Yeah, I think it's like a Sanguine Bond, Exquisite Blood. Yeah, this replaces one of them. High Guild Mage, this pop. Of course, then. Other than that, we'll skip after the Guild Masters. We talked about them. We'll skip with the Guild Champions because that's Dragon's Maze. Let's talk about the mythic spells that are here. And we have Master Biomancer, our mythic Simic. Each creature you control enters the battlefield with a number of +1/+1 counters equal to Master Biomancer's power, and is a mutant in addition to its other types. You make things mutants, they get bigger, and hey, you're talking about Simic. It's +1/+1 counter matters. You make this guy bigger, make all your other creatures bigger. Anyway, you had hybrid common spells. Here's our Boros one, Exile Artifact. That's it. It's simple. And then hybrid uncommons, of course, we also had where we have our Simic here one, Merfolk of the Depths, the 4/2 Flash. Simple there. We had our hybrid spells that are rare. A lot of hybrid spells. We have our Gruul one here with Rumble Belt Raiders. Whenever it attacks, put a +1/+1 counter on it for each attacking creature you control. So yeah, you want to attack with this and a whole bunch of other creatures, and it gets pretty big then. You know, you're juicing, you're beefing up your creatures with that. Of course, we had the rest of the key runes. These were tapping for one of two colors, the two colors of the guild they're part of, and they become creatures. The Boros one here becoming a 1/1 white-red creature with double strike. And of course, hey, the Shocklands. I showed off one of the Shocklands earlier. We got to see good old breeding pool earlier. Now we're seeing Godless Shrine from Orzhov, our black-white, our swamp plains. And battlefield tap unless you pay 2 life. It's the Shocklands. They're classics. And then, oh, wait. We can't forget, of course, the Guild Gates. I showed off that we had Guild Gates back as a big theme and, you know, gate-related stuff to a degree. And, hey, it is part of the cycles here. So I feel like it's appropriate to mention it again. So there were some reprints in this set. Yeah, surprisingly, even with a lot of cards, there was an actually good number of reprints. Frenzy Tilling is one of them here, but this isn't the only one. There's 13 actual reprints here. Frenzy Tilling was last seen in Invasion. Granted, it has some pretty good uses and it fits very Gruul, destroying a land, searching a library into basic land, putting it battlefield tapped. I liked Frenzy Tilling from back in Invasion. I used it a bunch back in the day. I feel like, and things like Naturalize are here and a bunch of others. The Shocklands are technically reprint. Active Treason, which was seen in one of the core sets. You know, there were some things there. There's some other ones that are functional reprints and some better and worse cards, as most sets are. But really, the big thing here, because again, like all the other ones, there's a few of, there's a good chunk of reprints in this set. I think that's just kind of where I'm at with the reprints kind of situation. Let's talk about some interesting notable cards. There's some fun ones here. So let's start out with, of course, Enter the Infinite. Why is Enter the Infinite notable? It's a powerful combo that includes Omniscience from only a few sets prior. Omniscience, where you can play everything for free. Draw cards equal to the number of cards in your library, then put a card from your hand on top of your library. You have no maximum hand size for your next turn. So, this is an interesting one, because Omniscience means you can cast spells from your hand without paying their mana cost. And Omniscience is 10 mana. Enter the Infinite is 12. They're expensive, and there's some things that have comboed with them. Anyway, Thespian Stage. Now, why is Thespian Stage so infamous? It actually is. Let's read it for a second. Tap out a colorless mana, or for 2, tap. Thespian Stage becomes a copy of target land and gains this ability. Okay, why is that powerful? Dark Depths. Dark Depths is a land which comes into play with a whole crap load of counters on it. 10. You remove it for 3 mana. When it's no ice counters, you sacrifice Dark Depths and get a 20/20 black flying indestructible token. Merit log. Dark Depths. I put it out. Thespian Stage. Huh. What do you know? I have a 20/20. This is the backbone of a lot of big legacy land-based combo decks, and also is a good reason Dark Depths is banned in Modern. Thanks, Thespian Stage. Thanks. Anyway, Rapid Hybridization. Destroy target creature. It can't be regenerated. Its controller gets a 3/3 frog. It's all playing Devotion to blue decks in Standard. It was a pretty strong removal, and it does see some playing Commander. Boros Charm. Boros Charm is a pretty aggro charm, and it also shows up in a lot of Modern that focus on direct damage. It's for 2 mana, deals 4 damage to target player. Permanents you control indestructible this turn, or target creature gains double strike this turn. Got some pretty good uses there. So you can see why, in a lot of like red-white decks, especially Modern, this could be pretty good. Biovisionary has an alternate win condition. That's it. There's another one too we'll talk about in a second here, but this one here is the beginning of your end step. If you have 4 or more creatures with that called Biovisionary, you win the game. Like if I have Rite of Replication or another clone ability and I create a bunch of them, I win the game. The other win the game ability is Helicite Tyrant. So these are alt win conditions that were introduced here. A 6/5 flying trample for 6 mana, which is pretty good. And when it deals combat damage to player, you steal all their artifacts. All these are really good for Helicite Tyrant. You stealing artifacts, it's a 6/5 flying trample for 6 mana. Boom. But at the beginning of your upkeep, if you have 20 or more artifacts, you win the game. I'm not gonna lie, I feel like that's an extra for this thing here. I like it otherwise. Now, there are a couple of extort cards we haven't talked about because they have a lot of play in Commander, and they have a lot of like things related to that are pretty powerful in a lot of ways. They find a lot of Commander play for various reasons, but they are extort cards too. Blind Obedience. Artifacts and creatures your opponents control enter the battlefield tapped. That's pretty mean for 2 mana. That could be very shutting down. And it's extort. Yeah. The other thing in here, of course, Cryptcast. Cryptcast is an interesting one here, because it's got extort again. But whenever you tap a swamp for mana, you add a black to your mana pool. Yeah. Not a basic land swamp, a swamp. Combine this with something like Urborg, where all your lands are swamps, or just playing with a lot of non-basic swamps, you basically double your mana. Now, I will mention for these two, there's been some rule questions related to color symbols and reminder text not being the colors of the commander because they're used a lot, but they are a thing to kind of keep in mind here. They're not going to be too critical to what we're going on here, where we're going. Legion Loyalist. This is one of the most fun of the battalion creatures. It's a 1/1 haste goblin soldier. I have this guy in my goblin deck. My Zoblin deck, technically. Now, why is he important? Well, again, he's got battalion, so when he or 2 other creatures you control attack, you gain an ability. What's that ability? Creatures you control get first strike and trample into the turn, and can't be blocked by creature tokens this turn. Yeah. First strike and trample are powerful in and of themselves, but also tokens can't block your creatures. That can be a big thing. It was a strong card in Standard and Pioneer and a lot of decks there. I can still see play for it, but probably not as much now. And of course then, our other big play that was notable was Boros Reckoner. Had a lot of play in Standard. This one is dealt damage. It deals that much damage to target creature or player. So basically, when it absorbs a hit, it also deals that damage, and it can get first strike until end of turn. So, yeah. Very interesting kind of constructions and directions there. There were some bans and some restrictions. And of course, we can start out with the 2 grind ones, which were... Grind was a lot of irrelevant things. Basically, Zendikar Rising basically kind of did some things that kind of changed some stuff, because there were some double-face card lands, which didn't register for lands for the grind ability. Keep that in mind. So, a controller allows a controller to mill their entire deck of their library and win through some combos this way. So, this card here, and another card we're going to talk about in a second, were banned from Pioneer in 2012 for some combos like that. Though, you do see some combo and some card play with this in Pauper, Modern, Legacy, Vintage variations of those decks, where the entire idea is, I have not lands, the double-faced lands from Zendikar Rising, and I mill out my deck and win with it. Balster's Spy here is a flying 2/3. When it enters the battlefield, target player reveals the top cards of your library until it reveals a land card, puts them into your graveyard. Undercity Informer, tap 1, sacrifice a creature, target player does the same thing, grinds. Burning Tree Emissary. This is an interesting one. It's a 2/2 for 2 mana. It's a Grizzly Bear. Why is it major? Because when it enters the battlefield, you get a red and a green. To your mana pool. So it's a Grizzly Bear that pays for itself. It's been in a lot of Gruul decks in Standard, Modern, Pioneer. It was suspended in the Historic format because it had a lot of aggro that it caused con with this. Because people could dump their entire hand on turn 2 with this one. Interesting. Let's talk about another of the Primordials. Hello, Sylvan Primordial. You're very nice to meet. Why are you important? You're 6/8 reach. Another one of the primaries, it's Reach's ability. Well, when it enters the battlefield, for each opponent, destroy target non-creature permanent player's control, and for each permanent destroyed this way, search your library for a forest card, put it in the battlefield tapped. So not only you destroy a non-creature permanent, for each of your opponents, you get land. It had a small impact in Pioneer, but where this has been banned is Commander and Oathbreaker, because it destroys a bunch of permanents, and you can just flicker it. Yeah, a green-blue, I flicker this, I destroy more of my opponent's non-creature stuff, shutting down their artifacts and lands, and I get cards. You can see why this was banned. Let's talk about some other cards. These are cards I like that I think were interesting to talk about. Some of them I've used and some of them I haven't, but ones that I'd like to mention. Aetherize. We'll start with this one. Return all attacking creatures to their owner's hand. This is like the blue version of a fog, I would call this, but it's like a mean version of it because it's, you know, oh, you attack me. Rather than prevent damage, you just bounce all the things to its owner's hand. The Diluvian Primordial. Hey, another of the Primordials, the 5/5 flying one. Why is this one I want to talk about? Well, when it enters the battlefield, for each opponent, you may cast up to one target instant or sorcery from that player's graveyard without paying its mana cost. If you cast this card, would be put in if the card cast this way would be put in the graveyard, exile instead. So yeah, you play this, or Blinkius, or do anything like that, you get instant or sorceries from your opponent's graveyards, you get to cast them for free, and then they get exiled. So not only do you get them, your opponents don't get them anymore if they have a way to get them back. Duskmantle Seer, a 4/4 flying for 4 mana. That's mean enough. You're mythic. Why are you crazy? At the beginning of your upkeep, each player reveals the top card of his or her library, loses life equal to that card's converted mana cost, and then puts it in their hand. This is one of those things is like, if you have a lot of cheap cards, you're good. You're also forcing your opponents to draw cards and lose them life. There can be some combos you can do with that make it mean. Giant Ataphage, a 7/7 trample. When it deals combat damage to a player, you get another one. Gift of Orzhova. I like this one because it's for 3 mana. Enchanted creature gets +1/+1, flying and lifelink. Pretty simple, but nice, honestly. And I like the, stained glass wings. I think they're kind of neat. Glaring Spotlight. Creatures your opponents control with hexproof can be the target of spells or abilities you control as those they didn't have hexproof. Yeah. For 1 mana, your opponent's creatures don't have hexproof, basically. It doesn't get rid of it, so they can't target each other if you're playing multiplayer, but it means you can target their things. And for 3 and sacrificing the Spotlight, creatures you control gain hexproof until end of turn and are imblockable. That unblockable can be mean. Guardian of the Gateless, I want to talk about it because it's I can block any number of creatures. And whenever it blocks, it gets +1/+1 until end of turn for each creature it's blocking. So not only can it block everything, it gets bigger. Meaning, yeah, maybe it can't absorb all the damage, but it absorbs a bunch of it. Jeer Sage. It's an evolved Sage where taps to add 1 mana for each +1/+1 counter on it. So really, when you played originally, you don't get any mana, but the bigger it gets, the more mana you get. So that's an interesting one that way. And you can, you're Simic. You can put +1/+1 counters on it from another way. Illusionist Bracers. Whenever an ability of equipped creature is activated, if it isn't a mana ability, copy that and choose new targets. Yes, this is an equipment that doubles the abilities of your activated abilities of your creatures, as long as they're not mana, which can be very mean. There's a lot of stuff you can do with Illusionist Bracers. Lord of the Void, a 7/7 flying. When it deals combat damage to a player, exile the top 7 cards of that player's library, and then you take a creature card from among them and put it under the battlefield under your control. So not only do you exile the top 7 cards of an opponent, you get a creature from it. Merciless Eviction. You choose 1. Exile all artifacts. Exile all creatures. Exile all enchantments, or exile all planeswalkers. This is a good modal one. Now granted, I would probably use other different board wipes, but I would kind of have this one in pocket because it's a modal one where it's like, oh, I need to get rid of artifacts. Oh, I need to get rid of creatures. Oh, I need to get rid of enchantments. Oh, I need to get rid of a bunch of planeswalkers. There's some uses for this one. That's why I like it. Ogre Slumlord. It's in a rat deck. Hi, Ogre Slumlord. Whenever a non-token creature dies, you get a rat, and rats you control have Death Touch. I mean, if you're playing a rat deck, you want a Slumlord. Realm Right. When there's a battlefield, choose a basic land type. Lands you control are the chosen type in addition to the other types. So basically, Realm Right is like the form of you choose it for like Urborg. You know, I put in Realm Right in play, I get to choose what it is. Rather than, this is it, you know, kind of position to be in here. So, alright. Let's talk about the intro decks. Our intro packs. Hi, intro packs. We're going to start talking about you. We'll start with, of course, Boros Battalion, our red-white around the Boros Legion. It's a Boros deck. So, I mean, Battalion, Burning, red-white, small number of creatures, small creatures, you know what you're getting into. Of course, the two cards here are ones that technically both talked about. Founder Champion, we talked about it with its promo card, and Firemane Angel, we talked about it with its promo card. Yeah. But now we understand Battalion a lot more. When they have two creatures attack, it deals 3 damage, and you gain 3 life. 2 creature a player. Meaning that when you attack with it before combat damage is dealt, you can nuke something that could be possible blocking. Just in play. Anyway. Then we have, of course, our Dimir deck. Dimir Dementia. Our blue-black deck. It's Dimir. I mean, like, most of these decks are just what they are. What the guilds are. You can't really like argue against that. Hello, Consuming Aberration. It's nice to see you again. We talked about you earlier today. We talked about how mean you are. Whenever you cast spells, you mill them until they reveal a land, you know. And it's a power tough equal number of cards in your opponent's graveyard. But we do have another spell here that we haven't talked about. Whispering Madness. Each player discards his or her hand, then draws cards equal to the number of greatest cards discarded this way with Cipher. So this is kind of like a cycle out of hand a lot, which could be good, could be bad. I see uses for it. I see at times, when time's a place to use it. And the Cipher is just a little bit of bonus extra. Gruul Goliaths, our red-green rule deck. So, you know, Blood Rush, big creatures, stomping, crushing into things. Rumble Hulk is one of our 2 rares here. We talked about Rumble Hulk. The other one's a new one we haven't talked about. The Gruul Rage Beast. When it or another creature enters the battlefield under your control, that creature fights target creature an opponent controls. So it would fight a creature or another creature. They fight. You don't have a choice. You're fighting. Orzhov Oppression. We're going to be extorting a little bit here and doing some black-white shenanigans with our Treasury Thrall, who we've talked about in beginning here in promo form, where if you attack, you may return an artifact, creature, or enchantment from your graveyard to your hand. But we now have the High Priest of Penance. Whenever the High Priest of Penance is dealt damage, you may destroy target non-land permanent. Meaning, effectively, you're either attacking to do some damage, and your opponent probably doesn't want to kill it and deal it damage. They want to basically they want to kill it by dealing it damage. Or you could leave it as a blocker in which your opponent might fear killing it because they might lose something that's non-land, basically, which could be a creature too. There's a lot of meanness to the High Priest of Penance. I do like it that way because of it. Simic Synthesis, our green-blue Simic deck for the Simic Combine. Of course, we've got Evolve and various things like that. And our 2 cards here are Fathom Mage. Hi, Fathom Mage. We talked about you in your promo version, others. But we also then have Unexpected Results, which I think is a fun one. Shuffle your library. Reveal the top card. If it's a non-land card, you may cast it without paying its mana cost. If it's a land card, you put unexpected. You would put it into the battlefield and put Unexpected Results back in your hand. So either you get a card for free, or you get a land and can cast Unexpected Results again. Yeah, it's random, but it's fun. I like Unexpected Results. Let's talk about the 2 event decks. Yes, we've reached that time period in our discussion. The event deck time. And we'll start with Rally and Rout. So Rally and Rout is a Boros deck in a lot of ways. It's a red-white representing the Boros Legion. Yes, so it's meant to be a Boros deck. Now, the interesting about this deck and both of these decks here is both of them have 7 rares, but one of each of those rares. Actually, 8 rares. I'm sorry. 8 rares, but no, 7. I was right for 7. Sorry. So they both have 7 rares, but one of each. I know some of these event decks, they've had multiples. This is one of the... Both of these is interesting because both of them don't have it. We, of course, have our Cliptoff Retreat, Slayer Stronghold, Ash Zealot, all from older sets. Ash Zealot being from the only one from Ravnica so far. The First Strike Haste 2/2. Whenever a player casts a spell from a graveyard, it deals 3 damage to them. Champion Pariah from Innistrad. So we've got a bunch of Innistrad-related stuff here. Silverblade Plowden from Innistrad, and Thalia from Innistrad. So really only 2 cards are Ravnica cards. Of course, first off, our Ash Zealot, and the other one being Spark Trooper, which is a 6/1, Trample, Lifelink, Haste. It's basically Ball Lightning, except also having Lifelink. Ball Lightning is the infamous 6/1, Trample, Haste. You throw it out there, you do 6 damage. This one is the same thing, except it's also got Lifelink. So at your end step, you sacrifice it. So, yeah. But yeah, it's a very... The event decks are always interesting. They don't have a lot of, like, outside variety. Anyway, the other event deck was the Simic Thrive and Thrash, the green-blue deck. So these were very much so the colors of these decks. That's the thing to kind of keep in mind here, too. They are like a expanded standard version of these decks. Of actually the intro decks in a lot of ways. So probably you could take the intro decks, combine them, and make something a little bit better, but there's also other cards you probably want to add in here, too. I'm not going to lie, there's probably some pretty good things to add in. Similarly speaking, we had a mixture of some Innistrad block stuff with Deadeye Navigator that has Soulbound and gives you a blinking ability, Dungeon Geists, and of course the Wolfrin Silverheart with another Soul Wings. We also had some M13 cards with Sphinx of Uthun, revealing top cards and getting one in your hand on your graveyard, Thrag Tusk, where you gain life and it dies, you get a creature, and of course Yeva, the Flash, giving your green creatures Flash. It's interesting to see that really you have one Ravnica card here, and interestingly enough, it really is... Wait a second. Why is that in here? It's a Gruul Rage Beast. I just realized you're gonna have to cheat that in somehow. Because it's red and green. You don't have red cards here. I missed that when I was looking at these cards. I don't know. I guess they want a splash of red cards in here, and they don't have it, but they have the rare in here for a splash of red cards. Weird deck design. Gruul Rage Beast. Hi again. Why are you here? I guess there's good reason to be here. I guess, honestly, the fighting ability or something like that, and maybe, again, there's ways to cheat it in, I assume, in amongst everything that's here. Or to create the mana appropriate for it, but still. It's a little odd that's in here. But there you go! There's Gatecrash! It's an interesting set. I do like a lot of the cards in it. I think the guilds are pretty well built. I'm not gonna lie, some of them feel better built than others. Things like the Gruul ability is interesting, but not great. I think the Orbzov ability of Extort is very good. The Boros ability of Battalion feels appropriate, is very good. The Simic ability of Evolve feels very good. Cypher is okay, but it's kind of like hard to use, I think, as the entire build. It's complex, hard to use, so I think that's why the Cypher isn't great. So Blood Rush is fine. I see some use for it, but I don't see a lot of, like, 3 of these abilities I can see use outside of this block, outside of Standard. The Gruul ability, the Dimir ability, not as much. Like, again, some Cypher cards are probably pretty good, but it's very complex. Again, and also, like, Dimir is just weirdly complex for these other things, even if it's got, like, multiple sub-materials. So you can see how the different guilds aren't all built equally. And I think we can kind of talk about how this was the same in Return to Ravnica. I don't know if I talked about it the previous time. Again, this is me with my goldfish memory, not knowing how I dove into it. But when we looked at the previously 5 guilds, they weren't all built right. I think Detain was interesting, not outside of Outward. Unleash, interesting, not really outside of Standard. Population, I could see. Overload, I could see. Scavenge was more of a... So really, like, you know, I think Cessnia is that in the last set were kind of the more powerful, and the other ones were fine. I think Unleash and Scavenge were kind of the lower ones there, with Detain kind of in the middle. I could see some use outside of that. But again, we're looking at Gatecrash here. Not all built equal with the kind of keywords. They thematically, all of them fit. I mean, that's the thing about this entire 2 sets here, because we're kind of got to talk about them together. They are thematically on point, and they are telling a story of something with these gates going on, and the background leading to the big story and the big reveal in the next set, Dragon's Maids. So this entire storyline and everything that's going on is going to come to head there, but the storyline really has been in the background for these first 2 sets. It's there's a little bit of it, but it's a lot of, you know, the guilds we're being reintroduced to, and very well. And again, as much as I don't think they are all built equally for power and use, I do think thematically they're all on point, and there's a lot of really interesting cards here. And I hope that me talking about them has shown you some that are like, oh, that came from this set. Oh, I want to use that card. And honestly, I want to use that card in Commander is probably the best thing I can say for people here. So, you know, let me know if you want to use some of these in Commander as we kind of finish up talking about them. And I hope you've enjoyed exploring Gatecrash. If you want to check out more of my stuff, please do, whether you're joining me live on Twitch or over on YouTube. If you're on the YouTube side of things, remember, comments, subscribe, all that stuff. And let me know what you think about these cards. Definitely there. But if you can join me on Twitch, that's great. I'm live. I record stuff like this. I have live plays. I discuss tabletop Saturdays at 6. All these kind of great things. But again, all the tabletop related stuff, that is up on YouTube. You can also do some gaming, chatting over on Twitch. I mean, I'm just saying. Good place to hang out. Anyway, please check out my social media. Discord's the best out of all of them. It's the one I keep most up to date. But all of them I give all the big information. Like live, video uploads, all those kind of things in the description. And until the next time, we dive into Magic history, go somewhere else tabletop related, or anything like that, I bid all of you out there a deep and wonderful farewell.